been doing this for a year. This is our second year we're doing this, and we are very excited to do our event with Carbide today. We have amazing panelists today, and we'll talk about compliance, SMB, and many different other things as well. So before we begin with all the topics, I would like to introduce our panelists. Darren, can you please tell us about yourself and what you do day by day?
My name is Darren Gallop. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Carbide. We are a tech-enabled software as a service platform. And basically what we do is we help companies that have to meet information security and data privacy compliance requirements. So that could be things like preparing for and maintaining compliance with SOC 2, ISO 27001, CMMC, also regulations like GDPR, PIPEDA, these types of things. We work with companies of all sizes, a lot of startups, a lot of companies that sell into enterprise or government where there's more complex multi-compliance requirements.
You're a Canadian company, so you guys based in Nova Scotia, correct?
That's correct. We're based in Nova Scotia. We have teammates spread right across the country, and we even have some folks that work with us south of the border in the US.
Thank you. Second, Ryan, you're a partner at Johnson Group. Please tell us about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Johansson, partner at Johansson Group. Our firm, CPA firm, specializes in SOC 2s and ISO 27001s. We do some HIPAAs and SOC 1s every now and again, but our firm's been in business for 10 years, and that's our specialty is the IT security and compliance field.
Brake, please tell us about you. Do you more on the customer side?
Sure thing. Yeah, my name is Dan Brake. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of a growth stage company called PolyUnity, and we deliver additive manufacturing solutions to the healthcare space. So basically, 3D printing for healthcare. And yeah, as a growth stage company, we use we leverage the tools that Darren's team built, Carbide, and we are on our path towards compliance, which is why this is a timely conversation.
Road to happiness. This is great. So we'll talk today about SMB, guide tuning security and privacy into assets. And I think sometimes in the industry, we use the term SMB like left and right, like everything like could be SMB, not SMB. And Ryan, you're out of US, we're here in Canada. I think we define SMB differently. So let's start from the idea, what does SMB even mean? And maybe Ryan, you can go first.
Yeah, SMB can mean a lot of different things to different people. Sometimes the government has one particular category that headcounts or revenue that they cut off, and a platform may or CPA firm may in terms of pricing. Oftentimes we think about it, we'll add a V in front of there for very small, probably 1 to 30 is kind of those pre-seed startup companies may have an angel investor getting in there. And then once you kind of move to like the 30 to 100, now you're kind of in that small business, you got a round of funding or two in there. And then you kind of move 100 to probably 200, 250. You kind of say you're a medium-sized business, and then you kind of move to a large business, and then you know your enterprises. So that's kind of how we think of it. I'm sure every place has a little bit different spin on the SMB space.
And Darren?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. My thinking is not substantially different than Ryan's. I think us Canadians north of the border, 20 people is a small. We wouldn't put the V in front of that. We'd just call that a small business. I think more often here in Canada, and then larger businesses. We think about your larger size businesses over 500. But I don't really dwell on the term. I'm not a huge fan of these types of terms that can have various different meanings depending on who you're talking to. So. I always ask companies when I'm working with them, whether they're a prospect or we're trying to give them some advice, like how many employees do you have, and what range is your revenue, just to have a kind of an idea of scope, and then just use that. I mean, things don't change drastically necessarily from whether you have 60 employees or 100 employees. As a security company or an advisor, we're probably going to do just about the same thing if you were 60 people and you were 100.
Yeah, nothing really to add from me. I think both the definitions from both Ryan and Darren covered it in terms of what SMBs are.
So Dan, you're last, so we're going to stick with you and ask you a bit more questions. We did mention SMB. We didn't mention potential SMB startups because sometimes we have companies starting, and by definition, it will be SMB because they're small. But what are the challenges? What they need to kind of day by day, beside building the product, the service, making the sales, like the other things that are happening there?
Yeah, some of the biggest challenges are focused around resources. You tend to wear a lot of hats, which is really exciting. It's great building things from the ground up. But a lot of the things that you need to build can take a lot of time. And so you're trying to get the right processes in place, the right policies in place, the right business structures to allow you to someday grow. And in order to do that, you have to be really strategic about where you place your resources, what you focus on, and make sure you're prioritizing the right things. Otherwise, you're not going to set yourself up for success. But yeah, a lot of it just comes down to like priorities focus with limited resources as you're trying to get a business off the ground and up and running.
Darren, anything to
Yeah,
add there?
I mean, I would echo all of those perspectives for sure. I'm also a founder and CEO of a startup, and I just happen to have the unique hybrid perspective of being also a cybersecurity and data privacy professional. And if I think back to my days in a startup, this is why I effectively decided to build Carbide. As my last startup, we were selling into the festival and event space, and as our product scope got very wide and we started to collect much more confidential data, and we became very integral in terms of our applications availability and their infrastructure. And we started working with properties owned by Disney and Live Nation and things like that. We started getting looked at very, very, very strictly from a due diligence perspective, and it really forced us to have to, upgrade our security substantially. But to Dan's point, you've got so many competing interests as a founder, as a CEO. It's like I always make the reference of spinning plates. You've got board, and you've got the board, you got the investors, you got raising capital, you've got your numbers, your sales, you got your renewals, you got a product, you've got trying to figure out what your competitor, it's just, and then you have this security thing, which I think for a lot of earlier stage companies is kind of new. If you go back 10 years ago, people weren't asking you for a SOC 2 very often, or you weren't, companies of this size weren't being required to have an ISO 27001 certification or even have a formal security program. It was very often thought of that, we're just an early stage company, don't worry about that. But the data out there had shown us different things, which is that when big companies get their security together, then the new entry point of vulnerability are all these little tech products and services that they're bringing into their business that create points of vulnerability. So it's really changed the landscape, and it's not just the question of time. I think the other thing I see a lot too, I see people, if you don't know security and you don't know privacy and you just start reading the trust criteria of SOC 2, it's not going to necessarily all make sense. And it becomes very difficult to try to make judgment of what do I need to do to meet this requirement? Does this work? Does that work? And so, when you're in a startup and you're already spinning plates, to have to spend all this time trying to Google things. And even when you Google things, you may get perspectives that are more contextualized to a 2,000 person enterprise. So just all the time and energy and mental energy you'll spend trying to unencrypt all of those controls and requirements, you're saving yourself so much time by getting the right assistance and the right toolage in place so that you can move quicker. And quite frankly, when you look at the investment and going with a platform or going with an expert that can help, or both of those things, you're going to move quicker. You're going to make better decisions. I've seen so many companies try to interpret this stuff on their own and just create so much noise and just waste so much time and energy doing it.
Ryan, do you want to add anything here, or they cover pretty much everything?
Yeah, no, they covered pretty much everything from what we see from our clients, is that it's competing priorities. You're trying to get your product out, make improvements to it, make the sales. And then on the other side, you're trying to get the compliance piece so that you can complete the sale. So, see a lot of people struggle to get those competing priorities because you often don't have an in-house compliance person driving that. You're wearing a lot of hats, and so it's always that competing priority.
I guess the question here: do I need to be compliant in the SMB? In what moment I need to be compliant, and if I need to be compliant, Darren, you mentioned ISO, you mentioned SOC 2, there's many other one. So how do I decide? Maybe Darren, you can start.
Well, I always say, I always believe as an entrepreneur, as a business, especially now that I really understand and I've seen so many different companies and so many different spaces navigate this. The answer to your compliance question, it really comes down to, well, what are you doing and who are you doing it for? What are the expectations in the industry, right? If you're selling primarily in Canada and the US, SOC 2 is very popular. I would recommend SOC 2 to most companies, and if it's a security compliance objective. I also like SOC 2 because you have more flexibility in terms of the types of controls that you can craft and the creativity around how you can build a security program that meets those requirements. Whereas if you go with ISO, it's going to be it's more strict, it's more rigid, it's more defined. But if you're selling to Europe in that mix, then ISO is going to be much more known. Same if you're selling in Asia. So, there is a lot of overlap. Like I also tell people a lot of times, like don't stress it too much. Like if you're selling in the US now, but you think you might sell in Europe, like the road to SOC 2 is on the same street that takes you to ISO 27001. And so, pick the one. I had this conversation with a customer today. They were they were burning a lot of brain cells and trying to make the decision. I was like, this is not a big decision in your life, right? Like this is not like you're not going to be down the road be like, oh no, what have I done? I think what's more important as a business is thinking about, and this is the way I always preach to this, is like, if you just think about security properly, think about risk, and you think about security, they refer to it security and privacy by design, and it's where you think about security and privacy risks at every step in your business. So from the point where you're, drawing your wireframes and building a product, if you can do some education where your team can start becoming aware of security threats and you start building practices and processes in there to check for those things along the way, you're going to achieve a couple of things. The first off is you're going to actually make product decisions that are going to be helpful for actually securing data. You're going to educate your developers so they're conscious, so you don't have all this, what I refer to as like technical security debt, which would be like a couple of developers spend 4 years building a product. They have no understanding, or they're not really factoring in security requirements. Then they come and get a pen test when it comes time to crunch to get a SOC 2, and their pen test comes back with all kinds of issues because they weren't really necessarily following a best practice. So if you think about security and you just really build your business with best practices in security, whenever that point is where you're getting ready to go commercialize or get proof of concept, you're going to be so much better prepared already, whether it's SOC 2 or ISO or whatever program you're going down. You're going to be so much better prepared to go through that process because you're already probably going to be doing much of the things that you should be doing. So I think about it that way, right? If you think about it and that's why I say, like, I see companies all the time say, yeah, we don't care about SOC 2, we don't care about security. We're just going to build all this stuff. We're going to spend like 3 years building a product, and then we're going to go and we're going to crunch down and get our SOC 2 in 2 weeks or something like that. Like that's a dangerous and risky way to do it, and maybe not even that efficient. You might end up realizing that you made really bad architectural decisions, or you didn't pick the right vendors because you weren't factoring in that you had to validate those vendors from a vendor risk perspective. All kinds of bad decisions that you're likely more exposed to making, that'll make that process of building that security program that's going to meet whatever requirement you're being audited against.
You, Dan or Ryan?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. It depends on where you're starting to sell from. Depends on how soon you will need it. If you're a B2C company, you can push it down the road a little bit. So if you're selling directly to consumers, right out the bat, they're probably not going to be as concerned about it as if you're a B2B. Those companies are working on their SOC 2 or ISO. They're doing their vendor management and will be looking for a SOC 2 or ISO right off the bat. So if you're coming up out of the ground pre-seed, you might as well just go ahead and put that in the budget and start working on it. What Darren said, kind of US, North America prefers SOC 2, Europe, APAC prefers ISO. You can get away with either one in either market. They may gripe and complain a little bit, but you can they'll take it. So it's who your customer is, what are they looking for? Start with that one. There's a lot of overlap between SOC 2 and ISO. So pick one that works for your customers today, and then you can expand down the road and make both areas happy.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and also, as an example, we work in the healthcare space. Healthcare information and data is expensive to lose, and it's also, in terms of the black market, that's, it tends to be the data that's sought after by those looking to hack in and collect data from various sources. And so you have to take security really, really seriously right from the get-go. And so part of it is, having a really good security program, but people want evidence, and people are going to ask questions. And working in the healthcare space, the better that you can answer those questions, and the better that you can verify that you do have a solid security program, your security posture is solid, it goes a real long way. And to be honest, there will become there'll be a point in time where it'll be really difficult to operate in a space without taking security seriously. And so just to echo Ryan and Darren, 100%, most of our customers right now are in North America. And so we're focused on SOC 2, HIPAA, and PIPEDA. However, in a previous life, I was focused internationally. We were focused on ISO 27001. So it really depends on what sector you're working in and where your customers are based.
There's an interesting point, and I wanted to add it around in 1 second, that people sometimes think that it's SOC 2 and some stuff is ISO, and you start from scratch. And I think Ryan, both of you and Dan mentioned, no, you're not. Now, if you're not using a system like Carbide, then you're going to have a lot of Excels and a lot of documents to figure out where the overlap. But if you are using a system like Carbide, they will tell you right away, hey, it was a SOC 2. This is what the rest is, the gap and the delta you need to do. So this is when people are like, oh, it's so expensive. But if you think about it, you're saving money in hours of very expensive people that can go and do their work and not trying to find which controls they need to fill right now. Sorry, Ryan, I interrupted you here before.
Yeah, I'll piggyback what Dan said and then move over to what you're saying. A lot of places, like in the healthcare industry or financial industry, they use the SOC 2 and ISO as kind of table stakes. And then they're coming in and doing their own audit of you. So don't think that a SOC 2 or ISO will cover everything, and they will come in and have their own specific requirements. Using a system like Carbide makes your life so much easier. It automates a lot of things. You can integrate it. It can become part of someone's job. Everybody's wearing a lot of hats. So for that SMB space, they can log in the morning, see what broke, fix it, and move on with building their products. So
doesn't do the job instead of you, but it does simplify it and save you time. So it's important to say people sometimes think they're going to put a magic tool and it's not.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about it right now. We're explaining what's the requirement and why to do it, but we know it takes time. We know it also expensive. So what risk and consequences SMB may face if they're not doing the work, if they're not doing the compliance, and they're still going and trying to closing deals?
I can speak to that firsthand because really my experience that catapulted me into this industry was that we were not a compliant company in my last company. And we'll go back, this is like 2014. We were a SaaS company providing back-end technology for music festivals all over the world. So our customers were like Coachella, Bonnaroo, Burning Man, X Games, events like this. And we were going out, we were just about to close a massive deal for Live Nation, which would have added about 10 to 12% to our ARR in one deal, 10 major music festivals that anybody who's in the music festival space would know very intimately. It was a closed deal. Their festival events management department had picked us as the vendor, and then they kicked it over to Live Nation's third-party due diligence department, which is, I'll give them a pat on the back. They know their security, and they know they can smell BS from miles away. And they came at us, and they came at us directly. They asked us tough questions. My co-founder and I did our best dance around them, and it did not work. And it killed the deal. Not just killed the deal for that year, but killed the deal and burnt the relationship, and almost lost other operations in Live Nation and other countries that we had already secured. So not only did it kill the deal that would have been very effective, but very, very impactful positively for the business, but also created lots of friction for us in other places. And so, yeah, that's the risk. And that was a while ago. That was when most companies weren't really being required. So Live Nations, I would argue Live Nation was ahead of its game comparatively towards a lot of industries. We're going back 2014, 2015. Now, that was a wake-up call for us, and we put a lot of effort in to improve our security. And then, we had to do GDPR and all that kind of stuff in 2017, 2018. But that's the experience. And I see customers do it all the time. Like, oh, we've got this big deal. They're wanting us to have a SOC 2. And if you unpack that, right? So the first thing that happens is, so if you're an enterprise organization buying from a startup, you're buying from a flaky customer. Look at all startups are flaky. Okay, if you're an early phase, like an early stage startup, we all know that you're probably not generating a bottom line. You're burning money, and you're at the beck and mercy of investors. And you still haven't proved your commercialization to a point of being a stable business. So you're already, you want to be in this position as a startup when it comes to the sales cycle to be able to demonstrate, a little bit of the peacock effect. You are greater than you are. So when they're asking you for like a SOC 2 or an ISO or a security report, and you have nothing to provide them, you have just completely opened up the conversation to demonstrate that you are not ready for their business. And that's a huge risk. So this idea that, oh, we'll gut it when we're asked for it, like that is too late. It's like saying I'm going to get my driver's license when I'm pulled over at the side of the road, right? Like it's just too late. And I can say it from firsthand experience in my last business, but I've seen so many companies, like they come in with their hair on fire and they've waited too long and they're saying, hey, we need a SOC 2. When do you need it? Oh, yesterday. It's like, okay, well, do you have any policies? Have you done a pen test? What can you? No. Do you have, what controls? What are controls? It's too late. And like this, there's no such thing as a SOC 2 in 2 weeks. Like I've seen companies do a really big lift in a couple of weeks to get a security program together, but you still have to call the SOC 2 auditor. You still have to make an engagement. They still need a period of time to monitor those controls and actions. So like if you wait until you need a SOC 2, forget it. You are way too long. You've waited way too long to do it.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, 100%. I've also had the experience of leading a couple of different security initiatives in organizations, and in the past, I've done it using spreadsheets and documents and trying to link. And the amount of time it would take us to pull our evidence together to do anything, it was just really, really challenging. Got smarter this time around. We brought on Carbide, which not only helps us collect the evidence and pulls everything into one place, but it also, like the dashboards will show us like how far away we are from our SOC 2 compliance, how far we are from HIPAA. So as a place to be able to track the information and demonstrate both internally and externally, like where you are with your security program, it's invaluable, and it just saves, like when you're resource constrained, it saves so much time trying to pull your program together.
Yeah, we see not a lot, but we see a number of clients scrambling and reaching out to us of like, hey, can you help us get our SOC 2? We've got a deal pending on this. And you're like, well, they didn't find out until the very end, because it goes through the full sales cycle and you got your champion ready to sign you up, and then it gets kicked over to the IT side, the vendor management, and then it just kills the deal, and they're trying to scramble. You can maybe get a type 1 audit in a couple weeks if you want to stay up late for the next 2 weeks and write policies, and you're using This Is My Carbide or something that can generate a lot of those policies for you, and hopefully you don't have to make any big changes. You may be able to get type 1, but these larger companies are going to pat you on the head and say, that's nice try. Where's your type 2? And you have to wait a minimum of 3 months, if not 6, before an auditor is going to be able to come in and perform the audit to issue that report for the type 2. And so you got 3 to 6 months, but then it takes the auditor another month, 6 weeks, maybe even 2 months to perform that audit and issue the report. So you gotta really plan ahead.
A small commercial break. It is a live show. Everybody's listening right now. Please ask your questions. We're here for you. There's a special tab here in the bottom where you can ask your questions, and we'll get to them in the end, or maybe we can stop and answer a question as well. So Ryan, you were thinking about something about the times it takes, and you'll talk in a second about what is the realistic time it takes to take it. But I'm wondering, what is your take as an auditor if a company asks you for SOC 2? and you don't have it and you're working on it, is this a good idea to ask your auditor to create a letter to explain, we are not there, but we are in a process. Here's a letter from my auditor that says we're not bullshitting, we're actually working on this process right now. Because in some cases, I believe it may help to understand, okay, you're actually working on this right now. You're not just kind of saying blah, blah, and you're not doing anything.
Yeah, we see our clients use that quite a bit. It helps that keeps that sales conversation going. So providing the letter saying, hey, I've bought Carbide or your other GRC platform. A lot of them have a gap analysis that you can run out of it and say, we're not just blowing smoke. We're making a lot of progress. We got everything lined up. We're just dotting our I's and crossing our T's there. So yes, if you get kind of caught a little bit behind or things move faster in the sales cycle than you expect, using letters from your GRC platform, from your auditor, will absolutely keep that sales conversation going. And we see in some places that it'll be written in the contract that, yes, we'll sign, but we expect to see a SOC 2 Type 2 within 6 months. And so that you can get a little bit of leeway in there in that contract because you've shown some good faith efforts.
I'm going to ask you a tricky question because we mentioned several times how we use SOC 2 as part of our sales process, because it was asked. So assuming you have your SOC 2 Type 1, Type 2, you have it ready, you've done it. Should you give it to your salesperson and just, hey, go give it to anybody that want? Or should you keep it and only understand who you want to give it to and why?
So there's a lot of confidential information in your SOC 2 Type 2. If you want a public-facing document, then you want to look at getting a SOC 3, which is a SOC 2 Type 2 audit report, but it's stripped down. So it's taken out all your controls and the results of that testing. The system description is very stripped down, a little more generic. So if you want to give something to your salespeople, then it's worth getting a SOC 3 so you can post on your website or give it to your salespeople. So I would hold back your SOC 2 Type 2, get an NDA in place, and make sure that they're serious about it before you share that confidential information with them.
All right, Dan,
Yeah,
let's see to that here.
I would just add, definitely, I agree 100% with the SOC 2. Same thing. I see a lot of times companies are asked to provide all their policies. It's like, those are internal policies about your organization. And, quite frankly, if you had it like as a hacker, if put your evil bad guy hacker hat on, if you had all the policies, all the security policies, a list of all the vendors, their SOC 2 report with their system description, that'd be some pretty good data to be fueled with as you get ready to hack a company. So that's not public information. And I generally don't, I always recommend customers don't provide that and say, you're in that, it is a new trend I see where a lot of companies now, they'll actually ask you about your security before they even put you in as a contender to be a consideration in their vendor competition. I think that's just because so many companies have gone through a whole vendor selection process, picked a vendor, then it gets rejected by the due diligence department that's doing the IT due diligence or the security due diligence on vendors. So they'll ask up front. But you can just what we do a lot of the times, and kind of to Ryan's point as well, we'll generate a report, we'll generate a security report summary, which is just a short document. It states that we'll state as a third-party group, Carbide, that you've hired us for objective ABC, and that you are currently working towards whatever stage it's at. Even if you have your SOC 2, we'll generate a security report that's high level, doesn't get into the weeds that would be, say, reconnaissance information for a hacker, but gives the organization confirmation. Yes, there's a SOC 2 in place. Yes, there's security controls that meet the compliances of X, Y, Z. Here's a list of the policy topics that are covered in the organization's information security program. And once there is a non-disclosure or a contractual relationship in place, we will provide greater details on that. And that's when you would send maybe a detailed security report with a SOC 2. I never recommend people sharing their policies. They're internal policies. Why would you be sharing those with people like, hey, look at our policies? It's not the idea. And quite frankly, third-party risk assessors, generally don't want to sit there and read 156 pages of policies. They'd rather see a SOC 2 or some sort of validating reporting, construction of reporting that validates, because you can have policies, and I see companies, security theater policies, where you get a tool like Carbide or a GRC tool that has a policy generator, you generate a bunch of policies, but doing the work and writing about doing the work are very different things. So, the policies themselves, internal documents, your SOC 2 does have confidential information. And yeah, so that would be how I would recommend going about it as well.
Yeah, and the only thing to add there is sometimes your SOC 2 isn't enough. Sometimes one of your customers or clients is going to have a whole separate security questionnaire that you're going to have to go through. And again, it's all about having a good security program, being able to answer those questions, and give people confidence that you have a strong security posture and a strong security culture within your organization.
I actually had this
Sometimes
question.
they'll even want to.
Yeah, please.
So I was just going to say, sometimes they might even want to talk to you or the people that are responsible within the business about the security program to get a sense of how real it is, how real your knowledge and understanding of it is.
I had a topic in my mind about third-party management and vendor management. I think you kind of guys all answered this, how you can use the SOC 2, what to give, what not to give, what to talk to. So we'll leave it by and move to some other topics as well. I do want to talk about the time to be compliant, like what's reasonable, what is not reasonable. Darren, you mentioned if I start my business and have the compliance in mind in the beginning, it probably will not be such a big impact. But let's assume a company been around for a year or two, they have some policies, they have some work, they have a good practice for the development. What is the reasonable timeline to do the work and stay compliant? Because I feel and I see some people doing a rush, and they're like, it's okay, we're compliant. Let's forget about it until next year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We see that all the time too. People like, it's all hands on deck. Let's get our SOC 2, and then they get their SOC 2, and it's just like crickets. They're not logging into the GRC anymore. They're not asking any more questions, and it's risky. I mean, I always make the analogy. It's like getting in good shape. You can't just start eating the kale smoothies and hitting the protein shakes and crushing the gym and get off the beer in May and work really hard for 2 months, and then just go back to drinking beer and eating pizza and not working out. Like, if you want to be in good shape, it's a practice. Security is a practice in your business. It's a cultural practice that you have to adopt. There's checks and balances. There's security meetings. There's tools that monitor. There's people have to engage in it on an ongoing basis. So it's absolutely the amount of work required. It does vary a lot. I mean, the scope of your business, the complexity of your business, what your product is, how secure, like what's the depth of the security program that you require, and also what's the cultural setting for the business as well. Some businesses are very agile, and if they have really good, strong communicative leadership that can illustrate the importance, and they have a good, agile, functional team, they can actually, I've seen companies put together really good security programs quickly. Like to Ryan's point, if you do the all-nighters, you could probably pull it off in 2 weeks. But I think more normally, I see a lot of like 2, 3, 4, 5 months going from ground zero-ish to having a good program. But like and then thinking about the work and maintenance, again, it's habit forming is what I always think of. It's like the maintenance generally for most companies is not that intense, but the change, the getting into the habit of doing things differently, that sometimes can take companies. Well, in fact, I'll be honest, some companies never get there. They're constantly doing this exercise. It's like, it reminds me of myself in the gym. I have these like moments of like looking in the mirror and being like, look at you, what have you done? Like, and then you go really hard, but like fall off the wagon, right? And like, I think a lot of companies do that, right? Like they have these like ebbs and flows where they like, have some outside or third party or some realization moment where they push hard on their security to get there, and then they let it fall a little bit. And I think that's what's really great about, there's a certain degree of accountability when you get into doing something like a SOC 2 every year, because you kind of eventually graduate into being continuously in a monitoring phase. So there is a pressure there. You don't want to be caught with your pants down. You don't want to be caught for 3 months of not being compliant. And if you have the compliance management platforms, if you have a platform in place that you're monitoring things, the bells will go off when there's vulnerabilities in your web application. Bells will go off if you're using the right tools, that endpoints aren't being compliant. If people aren't engaging with their reoccurring tasks and responsibilities, bells will go off. So you're being held accountable. But it is a shift. It's thinking about it from the top down. Senior leader, like the leadership in the business, has to be on board. It has to be dictated as something and interpreted as something of importance in the business. And it just becomes part of the business, right? It's not just the IT people. Your HR people need to be part of the program. They're onboarding employees. They're providing access to stuff. They're offboarding employees. That's a critical part. There's administrative controls that fall in place. People that are in product that are scoping things, they have to be mindful of risk. If you're thinking about, like in Dan's case, you start talking about data privacy and healthcare data, you've got to be thinking about the privacy risks and how you need to handle data and what you're allowed to do. You have to be educating people so that your humans can be, part of this process. It's not just, I don't like the term IT security, because IT security is just a category. It's just like, it's a subject within the greater domain of data security, effectively.
Yeah, I think that's.
Oh, good, Dan.
Yeah, there's a lot there to think about in terms of timelines. I think you have to be thoughtful about it. Like, someone has to remain focused on your security, and when you're a small organization, it's again, it's like you have to make it a habit to constantly be tapping on security. Otherwise, you'll never get there. But I think the other big thing is, when it comes to the responsibility of security, it's across the entire organization. So it really, from the leadership, has to help create that culture, and every single person within your organization is partially responsible for how security acts within, how effective your program is. And so because of that, there's, people have to understand what their responsibilities are. So it's more than just the policies and everything else. It's really about the education and the awareness, because it's more likely it's more likely a hacker is going to come from some social engineering attack. And some of them are really clever now, especially with AI, in terms of, some of the messages and some of the phishing attempts that we're seeing are just, they've become a lot more sophisticated, and therefore people need to be better trained and more aware of what's out there and where the attacks are coming from.
From the auditor side of what we see when clients are starting on this path and reaching out to us, there's a number of factors that go into it. If they are on a platform like Carbide, and if they decide to do it themselves, those that are on a platform move twice as fast, if not 100 times faster, than those that try to do it on themselves with a spreadsheet and start from scratch. The cost, internal cost, is way higher to try to do it yourselves. It's a lot of time spent there. If you're on a platform, 2 to 3 months is probably a good guess of what you can do, and it will depend on how mature the organization is. Have they started a lot of these policies? Have they built that culture inside? And so once they start hooking things up and start finishing up the documentation, the list becomes much smaller that they just need to tackle. So if you're on a platform like Carbide, you're kind of looking 3 to 4 months around there to get ready.
So I'm wondering, from a timeline perspective, we mentioned in general, but what is the hardest part to change? So we're an established company. We need to have SOC 2 compliance. And then you mentioned HR, we mentioned development, we mentioned onboarding, we mentioned many different things. Finance, in some cases, there's risk sections are quite big. What do you see is the longest part, or maybe the complicated part to change? Because it's not just, I'm going to go rewrite my policy in a week or two. There may be something else.
Yeah, there's a lot of, we refer to them internally as like the common roadblocks. One of the ones we see the most often is endpoint security, especially in startups that allow people to bring their own laptops to work. And so you're trying to make sure that those endpoints are secure. You're trying to make sure that there's a security baseline implemented across those endpoints. And the easiest and best way to do that is use an MDM tool, like some sort of tool or agent that can demonstrate, that your machines either enforce or demonstrate that the machines are compliant. And obviously you can't install that on a, it's very, there's some ethical and moral challenges with telling people what to do with the machine that they bought, that they use for gaming and they use for other things. So that's definitely one we run across a lot. We also run across the software one can be sometimes challenging, and it's not every organization. Like some organizations just blow right by these speed bumps. Like, if we're dealing with an organization that's already purchased all their own laptops, they own their own hardware, that's usually an easier thing to get through. The security when it comes to the web application, if you've got developers that are using very modern, very current frameworks and languages, database infrastructures, and they have, they're aware of things like OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, things like that, then generally, they probably already are running some sort of vulnerability scanning, and they've got a pretty good security posture. We do see cases where organizations, sometimes we discover in a scan or in a configuration scan that, they don't really know how to use AWS properly. They just kind of like were doing things they were reading on blogs, and okay, the app's up, don't touch anything, it's working, right? Like that kind of environment. So, certainly those, like the skill level of the developers, the awareness around security best practice, the skill level around configuration management, and then the human aspect. Like some organizations I'll talk to, I always find this fascinating. I'll talk to somebody and we're like, okay, here's what your people are going to have to do. Like, yeah, they're not going to do that. It's like, okay, there's a cultural thing here where you've got employees and they're not, you don't think your team is going to follow these new practices, right? Like we've seen some organizations where, yeah, no one's going to use multi-factor authentication. It's like, well, if you turn it on and make it mandatory, they'll use it, or their jobs are not going to be there for long, right? But those are some of the ones that we see pretty often. The other one, this is the worst one. This one is almost unsurmountable. It's when senior management doesn't care. Like they're just like, they pass this off to some like entry-level intern employee, project manager person, and they're like, just deal with this, right? And they're not willing, they don't care, they don't see it as something the business needs to do. They're not going to practice it themselves. So their leadership by example is going to be not caring. And then like those organizations are just pretty much doomed. Like, and there's nothing we can, like I can't do anything as an advisor, or a platform can't change those kind of things. So that's probably the most unsurmountable. We don't even really try that hard when like it's like swimming upstream in a really fast moving stream. It's pretty hard if management doesn't care.
On our side, we see clients slow down is kind of the same kind of thing. We call it herding the cats. The IT stuff goes really quick. It's fun. It's exciting. But when it comes to writing the policies and hunting everybody down to approve them, that's where we see things usually slow down, is trying to make the organizational change.
The one I saw, to add to what you guys saying as well, is developers. They're very smart people. They know how to do stuff. Everything is secure. Don't tell me how to do my stuff. And when you go to the approval process, when you go to the way that the controls are designed, who are approving what are the emergency changes, what are not the emergency changes, how do you classify them? I see many cases back to mindset. Like, no, you need to work differently. You cannot just push your changes anytime you want because you need to go for a coffee with your friends. Then they're going to push your changes right now. Like I feel those, the mindset, or sometimes the ways they just are used to do stuff. Like, this is how we do stuff all the time. It work. Why we need to change it right now? Any tips and tricks how to deal with them?
That's a great point. I don't mind those challenges though. I find like we can put them through like a tabletop exercise and really trip them up good, right? Really give them a taste of failure, or put a really good penetration tester to just really dig through and break things. That's my favorite, when you got somebody who's like, but they got their shoulders up and they're like, yeah, we know what we're doing. And then your penetration tester comes back and goes, look, here's your database. It's a part of your database on my computer. Those are those ones I think are surmountable. But yeah, we definitely do see some of that out there for sure, right? But funny fact, in terms, just one quick thing, sorry there, Dan, but I would argue, at least, this is probably going to change a little bit nowadays because there's a lot more hackers that are a lot more aggressive with a lot better tools. But, in the olden days when like 5 years ago when I started doing this kind of work, we used to see like most data breaches that we came across were where there was no hacker, there was no malicious actor. It was literally like some developer overconfidently delivering shit code on a Friday afternoon, and then all of a sudden like other users are like, hey, what's all of this data that's in my account and stuff like that. And that's happened so many times. Actually, Airbnb had a really bad breach like that a couple of years ago. There was no hacker, there was no malicious person. It was just literally a or an under-tested, poorly written, poorly architected piece of code that got shipped. And unfortunately, the issue was discovered by a massive amount of customers. And I've seen it many times, way more times than I've actually seen the malicious actor come and hack a small startup. So
Thank you. Well, I want to make sure we have some time for questions, if there's any questions. So people, guys, girls, anybody that's here, please ask questions. If you have any questions, there's a lot of topics here. I myself can talk about this for a very long time because in some cases, maybe people say it's very boring, but depends how you approach this. There's a lot of stuff you can do. It's very interesting and actually achieve good things and not just say it's compliance, a checklist. We can work with this later on. There's actually a question. Thank you very much. And a question is coming. After achieving SOC 2 compliance, what is the next step for the SMBs? That's a good one. Who wants to start with this one?
I'll start and see here's what I see. It's stay compliant. We see people take their foot off the gas. They get compliant, work really hard for that 3 to 6 month period, and then just let it go. They stop going to the gym, stop eating healthy. And year 2, when their client comes back and asks them, hey, we need your updated SOC 2 report. And they're like, oh yeah. and then now they start having some exceptions. So next step is don't drop the ball, stay compliant, keep on top of this, keep logging into your GRC tool and following those policies, because this is the wheel you're on now. You can't get off.
Just examples, policies can be that you need to do backups and DR every so often. You need to collect your logs. You need to show that you're actually doing onboarding, and every control maybe be monthly, maybe quarterly, maybe annually. So every control is designed to be in a certain time. And that doesn't mean that you guys say, okay, I'm in the month 11, I need to have my type 2 and then the year now I start. No, you already missed the year because you didn't do your monthly, you didn't do your quarterly.
Yeah, like you're supposed to do a quarterly vulnerability scan. Well, we're going to be looking for Q1, Q2, 3, and 4. You just can't put it all in Q4 and think it's going to pass. So all those daily and monthly, quarterly items we're going to be looking for.
Okay. So here's another tricky one. What if I missed a month or a quarter? I didn't collect one part from whatever reason. I went to Hawaii, I got sick, God forbid. I just missed to collect this control. Like, what do I do?
As soon as you find the mistake, go correct it. So if you miss something, as soon as you catch it, perform that control that you were supposed to do. As an auditor, we'll find it. It will note as an exception on your report, but it does not mean you fail. You can rack up a number of exceptions before we need to start looking at changing the opinion. But in the report, you can add a section 5, which is management's response, and which you would say, hey, I missed this step and I caught it as soon as I got back from vacation. We realized we didn't have a backup, and now we've created a backup process for these controls. So it's not the end of the world, but as soon as you catch something, you want to resolve it.
I think it's important to say here, it's not like you're a public company to go and tell everyone, I forgot to collect the logs from my EDR. You only give this report to people that need to. So it's not such a big deal. It doesn't mean you should go and now just do whatever you want, but in case you honestly made a mistake, there's a way to correct it. So I think it's a very good topic and point. Do we have another question? Somebody asking how to get a job in Canada as a fresh graduate. It's a good question. Not for this panel. Connect to us on LinkedIn. Be active as part of the Cybersecurity Network. There's a job section. It is quite big. Maybe just you can put a link here for the job section later on. There's many different ways to connect it. There's many conferences as well, but not on this funnel. But here's an interesting one. How can SMB deal with the lack of in-house expertise in cybersecurity to effectively be compliant in their business? This is a good one. If I don't have somebody internally and I still need to collect the evidence and still be secure, what do I do?
Well, that pain that you described there is the exact reason why the space that Carbide operates in exists. There's companies out there that their sole purpose is to support companies that don't have the skills and the expertise. I think Dan could probably give some more feedback on that. As a company that has procured assistance in this very project, in this very objective.
Yeah, 100%. If you don't know the space and don't know cybersecurity very well, and you don't have the in-house expertise, a couple of things. Yeah, first of all, I would seriously consider getting a platform. It's going to speed things up. It's going to give you really clearly defined pragmatic tasks that you need to have. It's also going to set your reminders, right? So you don't have to, it reminds you to do your monthly or quarterly backups. It reminds you to have all these processes in place and helps you build your program. So I think that's a really good place to start. There's also like CISO as a service or these other experts that you can bring into your organization. So you may not need someone there full time. You are going to be spending a whole lot of time getting your policies and everything set up, but you maybe need some expertise and advice. And so it's something we've considered. We haven't actually pulled the trigger on it yet, but having a CISO as a service and someone where you can get really good opinions on where to focus, what to do next, is something else you may want to consider.
No, we can talk after the show about that if you want, okay? Thank you, guys. It's a very good topic. Then you mentioned CISO as a service. I think managed service providers, so MSSPs, is also a good direction to go. They will take care, or the MSPs will do your backups. They can do at least the work. As you mentioned, you want somebody to guide them as a virtual CISO, for example, or CISO as a service, or fractional CISOs. But you may have other people like managed service provider to look on that. And now don't forget, you're not just doing the security for the SOC too. You want to collect the logs and the evidence and the alerts because you want to be secure as well. So if you don't have somebody in-house, you want MSSP, you want someone to look on your alerts, you want someone to understand there's a problem in your environment. You need to patch, for example. So it's not just for the checkbox and for type 2, you actually have a very, very good interest to be compliant and to be secure at the same time. Compliant not always means secure, so you need to have both there. I know we're running out of time, so people ask how we can connect. Maybe each of you can describe where is the best place to connect with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach me directly if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Darren Gallop. I think there's 2 of us in the whole world, and I'm the only one that looks like this and has works in cybersecurity. So you shouldn't have too much trouble finding me. And if you're interested in learning more about Carbide, you can go to carbidesecure.com.
Great, Ryan.
Yeah, you can. We can hook up on LinkedIn. Ryan Johansson, I think it's MBA CPA. I have a picture of me there, or you can go to Johansson Group LLP, list our services there, and reach out to us there.
And yeah, LinkedIn for sure. Dan Brake. I don't know how many of us there are in the world, but there's definitely a few others. But anyway, yeah, you'll find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest place to connect. If you want to know more about PolyUnity, it's just polyunity.com. Yeah, that's probably going to be the easiest place.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys. Thank you, people that asked the questions and listening to us as well. It's a very important topic, so really appreciate the Client Cybersecurity Network and Carbide to doing this episode today and the panelists. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.